All right, hi everybody. How are we all doing? Welcome to the show. Dana, how are you?
Pretty good. Slightly stressed. I got a parent email that said, so there's still grades to go in. We're really concerned about, so and so that, our child has said that all of his work has been turned in. I'm like, nope. As far as I know. So I'm just like, I'm gonna have to write this email back and say, Z saying, well, she just hasn't put the grades in yet. I'm like, you haven't let me know that it's been turned in. So if it's been turned in, it wouldn't say it's been complete. Oh boy. Book club stickers. Book club stickers for your
That,
birthday.
that's Joe. That is a good merch idea. That is a good merch idea. Um, and thanks for catching up, Sarah. We've only been doing this show for for what? I mean, we did. How long did it take us to get through
Well, I
Dispossessed?
mean, every other week
So it was
for
really
for 11
for
chapters. I
11
mean, chapter
chapters. So yeah. So
22
well,
weeks.
22. Well, no, there were 13 chapters, so 26 weeks.
Oh, 26 weeks. Yeah.
So
So,
half a year.
dang.
Half a year.
Maybe Sarah doesn't like science fiction.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, can I tell you something? Can I be brutally honest? Uh, I like science fiction way less than you might think I do for someone whose channel has come to center on Star Trek. I know Star Trek isn't exactly like hard science fiction, but like my interest in sci-fi is a lot more limited than people might assume.
Why would they
So
assume that?
Well, because like people who are big, sort of nerds for one type of sci-fi, I have found, and this isn't always the case, but in many cases they tend to be like super into other forms of sci-fi as well, or just into sci-fi in general, and
Hasn't
that's
been what
not
I found, but that's okay.
that's not so much the case for me. I mean, like I love Star Trek, I love Star Wars, and literally after that point, it really starts to thin out. you know. Also, I want to point out
Didn't you see me like holding back a laugh, Sarah? We're totally friends. That was my I'm saying something so obviously false that it's hilarious. But apparently my delivery was less than stellar.
I also want to point out, Dana, that you are eating pizza in flagrant defiance of pizza night.
I know.
You can't you just can't
But
help
I
yourself.
had pizza on pizza night.
So this is extra pizza night for you.
It's like bonus pizza
This
night.
is bonus pizza night. so we mentioned this. Actually, we mentioned this on Wednesday at the end of our Trek Reluctantly stream. But for everybody watching us live, and for anybody watching us after the fact, watching the archived version as well, you can do this too. We're about
Play
to,
along at home.
yeah, play along at home. We're about to go through a
Survey.
what's called a survey. It's called the Likert scale, and so if you haven't already, have something to write on and something to write with, or just have like a word processor doc or a text file on your computer or your phone or whatever that you can type into and save it so that you can come back to it and we can talk about it later. um, Later meaning in future episodes, not later tonight, but because we're gonna go through that in a few minutes, and it's gonna be part of the fun of talking about the book.
Woohoo!
But speaking of the book, before we actually, and we're going to talk about the introduction in the first chapter of The Other Westmore, but before we get into the Likert survey and then talking about those parts of the book, uh, why don't you, Dana, tell us about why you wanted us to read this book?
Well, because it wasn't my choice. And this is a book that I teach,
Right.
but it was actually chosen by someone who taught 10th grade before I did. And that person picked it out when we were talking about, books that we wanted to do.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, okay. And the book that I had wanted to do before that was Nickel and Dimed. And I had reached out to the author and I said, we're from a high poverty district and I'm interested in teaching this book, I reached out to the authors of the publisher, and she sent me a class set. I was like, oh, great. And then
Sweet.
the department head was like, well, you realize you have to get that approved, right? I was like, oh, well, what's the process? This is way back. And I was
Right.
like a new teacher. So apparently there's like a lot of swearing in the book. And I was just
Heaven
like, okay,
forbid.
great. And I wrote up, this is what I did. And I just remember sitting at a table with like all these other teachers and administrators. And one of the administrators says, are you realize that on this page it says this, 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 and this? And I'm like, I did not notice. Like, I just, like, I didn't notice. But so this book does have some language in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other teacher said, I didn't realize about this. I'm like, okay, look, it's not, first of all, it got approved. So,
So get off my back.
well, no. The other teacher was worried about, getting in trouble for it because she was the one who'd requested it.
Ah.
I was like, it's been approved. So, you're covered in that sense. I said, but at the same time, to sort of help assuage concerns, I said, let's find out, all the potential issues. And then in the study guide, I have it says, this, which reminds me, I have another teacher who is using it for the first time, study guide. And I told him I was going to email him the study guide so he would know where it was. I forgot to do that today. Didn't do it. Oh my goodness. Some random geek. Exactly. Well, the thing is, like, when I first read it, I just like I had just read it and I was like, you know what? This, it talks about what it's like to try to subsist on low wages and to live off low pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, that's really relevant for our students because we live in a high poverty area, and they're, making, especially as 10th graders, are starting to make choices about, what they want to do and how they want to, plan out, what they're going to do with their life. So, so she proposed the other Westmore and got it approved. And then she was like, oh, there's language in it and the parents are going to complain and then I'm going to get in trouble and da-da-da. So we put in the study guide that this chapter has some language issues if, based around this. And if you want, you can stop reading here and pick up here and you won't, you'll still be able to answer the questions and get full credit for your assignments and stuff.
Sure,
So,
seems fair.
So yeah. I started teaching it and then I continued teaching it and I like the questions and the discussion that it creates. I've developed some additional materials. I just think this one also deals with the effects of poverty as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just something that's unfortunately really relevant for the area that I teach in.
Yeah.
As well, unfortunately, as society at large, more and more. And looking at the opportunities that the people involved have and how they're able to make use of them or what prevents them from, actualizing those opportunities. So, I mean, because it's, it's real life, it's not made up like a novel would be.
Right.
And also it's, it's relatively recent. It's something that, resonates with them.
Yeah. So that is the first sort of the most obvious difference, I guess, between this book and the book that we just finished, The Dispossessed, which is that this book that we're about to start is nonfiction. Which I have to say, I mean, and it's different school to school and district to district and state to state. But I mean, I'm trying to think of a nonfiction book that we read in my English class in high school, and I can't think of one. I don't think we ever did like a nonfiction book.
Memoir, the genre has become more common, I think, than it used to be.
Yeah.
So I think there are more opportunities for that. Additionally, the adoption and push for the Common Core not required, but pushed for more nonfiction reading, and especially more long form nonfiction. So memoir is a great genre because it incorporates, it allows us to look at some of the elements of fiction because it is presented in narrative form, but it also allows us to look at, elements of nonfiction. What do we trust? What do we believe? And especially with memoir, because it's based on memory, not just on recounting of facts. Right. So, and as the author says in the introduction, towards the end of the introduction, talks about, I've tried to say true. Some people, like, literally, I've changed the information. Some people who, were different people, I sort of composited into a character so that you kind of follow the thread of the story. And I tried to say true to the sense of what happened and the meaning of it, rather than just, going through and fact checking all the details, because it is a memoir. It is based on memory. It is based on how that person experienced it.
Right. Yeah, and it is told as a narrative. Yeah.
Charles Chapman says Diary of Anne Frank is the nonfiction book. I think a lot of schools.
And we didn't read that in English class. So there may have been another, and I think we may have studied like shorter nonfiction pieces, but in terms of like a book, I think all of the books we read in class were fiction. So shall we lead them through the Likert scale?
I would love that. Yes, let's. And I've got my document up. I haven't answered this in a while, so it'll be.
Ooh.
All right. So essentially, the way the Likert scale works is that there's a statement, and you rate the statement based on whether you strongly agree with it, whether you somewhat agree with it, whether you somewhat disagree with it, or whether you strongly disagree with it. Now, typically, there is a fifth option, which is neutral, but I took that out. Like when I created this for the students, I'm like, none of this neutral stuff. Pick a side and how far you go.
Make
and
deliberately,
I deliberately worded these to provoke discussion.
Right.
But at the same time, when I compile them and I share them with everybody, I take the names off. Like, actually, I run a photocopy of everybody's. I give them their photocopies back. I keep the originals. And then I run a set. I actually take off, like, I cut off the names and just run it through the photocopier again. And that becomes my original, like, master copy of everyone's responses. And then they do some data collection with it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You've talked about this with me before, and it sounds like a really cool project that does not remind me of English class at first, but when you go through it and explain it, it makes sense within that context. Okay, so I'm going to show everybody the first question, and
I think maybe 15, 20 seconds per question per prompt.
Okay, well, I'll try to. I'm going to have to load them manually onto into the program, so it might be a little longer, but I'll try to get them on there as quickly as possible.
Well, I just mean, because the point is, you're not supposed to think deeply about it.
Right.
Question yourself.
Right.
Just go for it.
Just your initial.
Jim says, grab a pen and paper. I want everybody, do all your responses and then hang on to them week to week, because we're gonna discuss probably two of them starting next week.
Yeah.
We're just going to do it tonight, and then next week we'll talk about two of them, and then not next week, but week after next, when we do the next chapter, we'll talk about two. So hang on to it so you can come back to your responses.
And it's multiple choice, so no pressure.
And there are no right answers. It's based on what you think. So it's
exactly.
Fair.
Okay,
I'm so excited about this. Okay.
So here we go.
Woohoo!
First question. And once again,
statement.
First statement. Yes. Choose the option that best describes how you feel about each statement.
Yes.
And the first statement is, anyone who works hard enough will succeed. Anyone who works hard enough will succeed.
Oh, I'm not looking. Crap. Is this A is strongly agree?
A is strongly agree. Okay. B is somewhat agree. C is somewhat disagree. And D is strongly disagree.
Okay. Well, I know what I put.
Well, you've done this before.
Yeah, but it's been years.
Okay. Question number 2.
Sentence. It's not a
Sorry,
question.
sorry.
It's literally not a question.
Statement number 2.
Okay.
Parents are a more important factor in what kind of person someone becomes than their friends are. Okay. Number 3. Black Americans commit crimes in greater numbers than white Americans.
Some random geek, you didn't have to prepare for this. I promise.
These are just opinion questions. Okay, ready for number 4?
I'm ready.
All
I'm
right.
waiting.
Here's number 4. In general, boys are biologically wired to be more aggressive than girls.
Oh wow. And I'm Harvard. Woo!
Ooh.
Oh, some random geek's gonna write me an essay. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay, here comes number 5. Someone who sells illegal drugs is a bad person. Here comes number 6.
Some random geek, you've got opinions on everything.
Number 6. Money does not buy happiness.
Man. Uh-huh. Emerlyn, we'll get to qualify our answers when we talk about them.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it, but yeah, these are just...
Loretta, that's up to you, deliberately.
Number 7. Men tend to be more naturally athletic than women.
I think the responses that I get here are going to be different than what I get in class.
You think?
Oh, the power of samples.
Number 8. Everyone in America has equal opportunities to be successful.
Wow. And you're answering these too, right?
Not right now. I'm a little busy, but I'll go back and answer.
Okay.
I will go back and answer them after the show because
Okay.
I do
Promise.
want, yeah, absolutely. I do want to
Okay.
have. I'm gonna, believe me, I'm gonna take part in the discussion.
Okay.
I promise.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I would answer them right now, but I'm busy loading them into the broadcaster so I can show them to
You're
everybody.
doing your
I'm
job.
doing my job. I'm running the show, Dana. Okay. Number 9. If someone disrespects you or takes advantage of you, you should get back at them or they'll try it again. Number 10. Black Americans tend to receive longer jail sentences than white Americans for the same crime.
Loretta, I'm just going as what I think right now. Now.
Yeah, I would advise anybody who's doing this along with us, try not to overthink it.
Just go with like Cardinal Doomsday says, first instinct.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go with your gut, and then we'll talk about it later.
Exactly. Number 11. Women usually talk more than men.
I have schmutz on my glasses.
Oh no.
No schmutz. Very important.
Schmutz-free glasses, I can imagine, is very important,
I made it up.
Number 12.
Almost
All parents would like to be good parents. And number 13, last one. People who aren't successful just didn't work hard enough. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. So yes, hang on to those
somewhere
answers.
that you can get back to it week after next.
Exactly. In our next episode, we will start to talk about what we said for those answers. So yeah, hope you had fun. Hope you had fun taking the survey.
Just make sure that I just want to fast forward. Actually, I want to fast forward through the next 3 weeks. Let's be honest. Oh, turning
why
in
is
late
that,
work.
Dana?
How soon are you gonna have this grade? How soon are you gonna have this? I'm gonna have 3 weeks of that. Too many shades of gray. Can you really have? I like gray though. It's such a nice, relaxing lack of color.
As Billy Joel said, shades of gray wherever I go. The more I find out, the less that I know.
Emerald, it'll be in the next book club episode. We'll talk about chapter 2, and we'll answer.
Yeah.
We'll discuss 2 of the
It would be a little bit of a non sequitur if we started talking about it in the next Star Trek stream. Or the yeah,
uh,
yeah,
or
yeah.
or Firefly. But yeah, I
Firefly.
mean,
Well, next week is Firefly. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so many of them. I mean, we could easily relate to both Firefly and Deep Space Nine. I mean,
That's true. There are shades of gray in abundance on both shows.
so yeah, and then I don't know. I think gray. I think clouds. I think lazy day and naps.
Can't beat that.
Mm-hmm.
So, shall we begin actually discussing the book now that the survey has
Yeah.
been
Do you want
taken?
to just start through with the introduction?
The intro, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and I guess we should, since this is mostly what
Yeah.
the intro is involved with telling us about, we should talk about what the premise of the book is. And the premise of the book, very very simply, very broadly speaking, is that the author of the book, Wes Moore, who is a Rhodes Scholar, uh, discovered that there was another person of approximately his same age, a couple years older, but roughly the same age, who had his name, who was also named Wes Moore, who had just been sentenced to life in prison as a result of a violent robbery where someone had been killed, and he became fascinated with this idea that this other guy who had his name.
They'd also both grown up in Baltimore.
Yeah, they both had grown up in actually, in I mean, not the exact same neighborhood, but I mean, not just in Baltimore, but relatively close to each
I
other.
think, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, not like the same street or anything, but like in the same general area.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so he became sort of interested in this idea of these two people who had the same name, had virtually the
Similar
same background,
backgrounds.
similar
Yeah.
backgrounds, and one of them had become sort of a success, and the other had fallen into a life of crime, and was now probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And so he began actually corresponding with
Hmm.
the other Wes
The other
Moore.
West.
Yeah, and and that's the book. The book is both of their stories told parallel, and sort of inviting us to, and Wes himself, the author, sort of pondering the differences and what it meant when one of them went one way and one of them went the other way. So
Yeah, and it's not just chronological. It's he says towards the end of the introduction that it's broken up into 8 chapters, and each chapter corresponds to a particular year that
yeah,
was important in both of their lives.
right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It does. It's not like a biography of both of them. It
yeah,
examines like crucial points of their lives.
yeah. Sarah, you absolutely are a nerd.
Yeah, and
All right,
we're
I
very
want to
happy that you've
validate that
decided
choice.
to. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we're
Oh
very
my,
happy that you've decided to join us.
yeah. Um, and that's, I mean, so I start off. Um, we didn't this year, obviously, but typically I have them read the introduction round robin. And
Yes.
so my rule, I have 3 rules. Rule number 1 is you have to read at least 1 sentence when it's your turn. And that keeps it down to, you know, it keeps it minimally intimidating for them. Rule number 2 is you have to, when you come across a word or a name that you're not confident in pronouncing, you have to give it your best guess and say it with confidence. Just
Yeah.
go for it. And, what that means is I'm not going to, give you any flack for getting it wrong, but I have to be convinced that it's your best guess. If it says Shakespeare and you come up with Jones, it's going to be really difficult to convince me that that was your best guess.
Right.
And then rule number 3 is if somebody else is reading, you read along silently, which means I should see your eyes pointing at the correct page. and you shouldn't say anything. If someone else has difficulty with a word or name that you know how to pronounce, you let them struggle through it. That's part of the process.
Right.
And just let them
Let
give
them
their
work.
best.
Let them work through it, and you get
Mm-hmm.
used to the discomfort. Because like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have like the impulse to jump in and correct it just to let the other person off the hook. But
Or because
that's
or just
or
because you
because
want
you
to
want to
just
show
get
off.
on
Yeah.
with it,
You're like
you know.
Shakespeare, 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 Shakespeare. It's pronounced Shakespeare. Damn it.
But I say this gives them an opportunity to practice phonics, even if they get it wrong, and it gives you an opportunity to practice patience. So we all benefit.
Huzzah.
Like trust me, I've had plenty of opportunities to practice patience. So,
Especially recently.
I mean, it's
Well, and
always,
I'm sure throughout your teaching
yeah,
career, I know, but I
yeah.
mean, yeah,
Yeah, this year's been it's been rough. So,
yeah.
um, and then I will stop them and we'll talk about things that I want to point out. Like down towards the bottom of page 1, they usually struggle with prothrow.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Um, and then on the second page, or excuse me, page XII, um, dun, 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 um,
Oh,
there are
yes, I
some,
remember. Is it during when he quotes from Wes's letter?
no, before that,
Oh, before
no,
that. What? I mean,
before that, some, and then of course some of them will get like really short sentences, and then everybody else will just sort of give them the stink eye. Um, Before that, and then the 12 days later, they're talking about the hunt for the burglars, of which Westmore was one, the other West. And 12 days later, the manhunt ended when the last 2 suspects were apprehended in a house in Philadelphia by a daunting phalanx of police and federal agents. That one
ah,
throws them.
phalanx. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I talk about I didn't think of myself as a superstitious or conspiratorial person. That sometimes will throw some of the honor students off. It almost always, if it's non-honors, they'll struggle with that one. And then I talk about the word conjuring, and talk about you can you say it either way. You say it with confidence, you're fine.
Yeah.
Just loud and proud, strong and wrong. And I talk with them. Another example I give them is synecdoche. Like I see it and it looks like synecdoche.
Synecdoche. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said it that way to another English teacher. And I'm like, I said, I want to introduce new types of figurative language. So I'm teaching metonymy and synecdoche. And she said, oh, gosh. I thought it was pronounced synecdoche. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it is. I mean, I just looked, I know what the definition of it is. I hadn't actually checked the pronunciation. And because I said it, because I said it with confidence, it caused this other person to be like, oh, well, clearly I must be wrong. And I was just like, no, I'm just going with it here.
Just saying it how it sounds, how it looks. Yeah.
And then we also talk about down towards the bottom of this page, there's a line at the opening of John Edgar Wideman's brilliant Brothers and Keepers about the day he found out his own brother was on the run from the police for an armed robbery. And so we talk about, I use that as an example of figurative language, allusion, not illusion, allusion.
Illusion. Yeah.
Brothers and Keepers. And of course, it's not super obscure. The reference isn't super obscure, but like Brothers and Keepers isn't the phrase.
It's an allusion. It's not an exact quote. Yeah.
Well, even an exact quote would still be an allusion.
That's true. But it's not an exact quote.
But it's like more difficult to recognize. And so I'll sort of, I'll draw their attention to it. Has anybody ever heard the phrase, that's Brothers and Keeper? No, never. They never get it just from the title.
But when you phrase it the way it's actually like, because it's the King James Bible. So when you say like when you
am I my brother's keeper?
Am I my brother's keeper from the book of Genesis from Cain
and
Abel?
Piece by piece. you start with, is anybody familiar with, does the phrase, what if we phrase it as the question, am I my brother's keeper? And then they start to look like, okay, I should know that. I should know that. And sometimes they'll get it from that.
Right.
And then I go, I sort of lead them to it. And eventually somebody will say, we'll start talking about Cain and Abel. And, and there have been times when like either just it's a, we hit it on like a Friday at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And just nobody's willing to talk. Or, there may have been classes where they weren't brought up on the King James Bible, So
do you ever talk to him about how Cain was completely in the right and Abel was a dick and had it coming?
Yeah, I finish up by playing Cell Block Tango.
He had it coming
all along. If you'd have been there, if you'd have seen it, how could you tell me that I was wrong?
No. Cain could have been singing. He could have been singing that song. He would have been in a different prison, obviously, but
I was thinking a different costume.
Different, yeah. Well, or maybe not. I mean, we don't know what Cain's proclivities were like. Who knows?
Well, I'm just saying, he wouldn't have had to wear anything up top. That strap wouldn't have, because of course, male nipples are so different from female nipples.
They're completely different.
Anyway,
completely different. Anyway, so Wes, in the introduction, we get to the point where he begins a correspondence with the other Wes, who is incarcerated in Jessup Prison in Maryland. And they're both from Baltimore, by the way. And Jessup is a prison that is in the Baltimore area. And
there's an allusion in chat too, Steve.
Which
you won't get. Thank you, Sarah Scott.
Yeah, I have no idea what she's talking about there. So.
I do. I know exactly.
Well, good for you.
I prefer Shamazay.
Yeah.
Just own it. Just own it. You're not human. You're not human. Anyway, we'll go on.
Right over my head. It's just.
It's a role-playing game reference, Steve.
Oh, I thought maybe. Hey, ask me how bad I feel for not getting it.
Steve.
Uh-huh.
How bad do you feel for not getting it?
Not at all.
Well, you know what? She probably wasn't talking to you.
Well, good.
So, he finally gets a letter back from the other Wes.
Yes.
Do you want to read it?
Yes. Greetings, good brother, the letter started out. I send salutations of peace and prayers and blessings and guidance to you for posing these questions, which I'm going to answer, inshallah. With that, I will begin with the first question posed. And I remember us talking about this before when you were teaching it, that I don't think any of them had ever heard the word inshallah either.
And usually, though, I say there's a word in there which should be unfamiliar to you. They don't want to say anything. Because they're like, that's loaded. Loaded. So, but I mean, we usually come to it, and then they usually are able to pick up on, his faith as, it's what do you notice? What do you see in that word? And in my copy, are you reading a digital copy, an ebook?
I'm reading a PDF. Yeah.
Okay. So is this on? I'm wondering if your PDF is set up the same way mine is, or can you enlarge?
I think it is. I think it is, because you said that at the end of the first page of the introduction is where he talks about the John Edgar Wideman piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we're on.
So does it hyphenate inshallah for you?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Because it does. It does in both. We have hardcover and paperback copies.
Yeah, no, for mine, it's actually, it's near the end of the line, but it's not hyphenated. No.
Yeah. So, it's, and I don't know if that helps because it's in and then shallah. So I don't know if that helps them.
Because it's still
hinders them. But essentially it takes it away from, because it's capitalized. So I think they would see it as, well, that's a name. You know what I mean? And so, So yeah, so we get to the point that it has something to do with his faith, and we,
Mhm.
we're able to identify that.
Yeah.
And even though you don't know this word, you can figure out what it's telling you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what it's it's an Arabic word, obviously, and it basically means God willing.
Yeah, with help, with God's
Yeah,
help.
yeah. Like I'm going to answer your questions, inshallah. I'm going to answer your help. I'm going to answer questions with God's help or
Yeah.
God
If
willing. Yeah.
um
Lord
I
willing
just
and the
saying,
creek don't rise.
you got to for us. Or down here it's God willing and Jesus tarries.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yes, that's a good
Yeah,
one too.
classic,
Yeah.
classic. Um so he says that it's not just about his memories and the other Wes's memories. He actually does do some interviewing and some um
Yeah.
some
To other people who were there during
yeah.
the time that during the incidents that he concerns himself with in the book. Yeah.
um to make sure I got the facts and the feel right. And we talk about not I don't spend too much time on it, but I do emphasize the difference between the different parameters between truth and falsehood, fact and opinion, and fiction and nonfiction. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like you
Yes.
can have, like, just because something is a fact, that doesn't mean that it's accurate. You can have
Right.
something that is stated as a fact and it's factually accurate. It's just, a matter of it can be proven or disproven.
Right.
Whereas students often tend to think of fiction as fake, like it's lying. And I'm like, no, there's no intent to deceive. When fiction is presented as fiction, like,
Everybody knows what it is.
it's fiction.
Right.
And the difference is it's not about whether it's true or not true. And we talk about how, fiction can sometimes, the whole idea of the universal truth, studying theme.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then opening each of the parts is a short snippet of conversation between Wes and me in the visitors room. And for me, those sections are in italics.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So and
and
he sort of he lays out the structure. So for those of you watching along with us, the book is divided into 8 chapters, and we're going to talk about chapter 1 tonight, and then a chapter per show every episode afterwards. So the Westmore series won't be as long as
not quite.
the Dispossessed series, but yeah, but the same basic structure, and then and also the little interstitials that start each part, we'll cover
They'll
those.
go with the next
They'll
chapter that
go
goes
with the
with them.
next chapter. Yeah. So yeah,
So
shall
anything
we?
else on the introduction, or shall we move across to the
The
look at you.
hey, that's I know words.
And I will say, every time when we're reading out loud, he talks about meeting in the metal divide. Was it here or is it in the
Is it when he talks about
the in between
the
area?
in between area? Yeah, the in between area
Is that in
where
this?
yeah. I'm trying to. I think it's in this section before at the start of the part, but I'm scanning and looking for it now.
Yeah, I don't see it. Dang it.
Maybe it is in the introduction. Yeah, it's in the introduction. It
Where are
was
you
very
at?
important. It was very important to me that we return again and again to that visitor's room, the in between space where the inside and the outside meet. And that's a really I never thought about visitors' rooms in prisons like that before, but that's a really apt description of
Where
them.
is that? Darn it.
It's on the last page of the introduction. The first full paragraph on my version, the one that starts, the book is broken up into 8 chapters.
Okay. Yeah, that's the second full paragraph on mine. So yeah,
Okay.
it is different.
It's a
The
little bit
layout is
different in the
different.
formatting, yeah. But yeah, it's in the middle of
Yeah,
this paragraph.
so every time we read through that, I'm like, it's a liminal space. But
Absolutely.
I've never said that to the students. I'm like, because I'm just like, but I mean, it is. It's that gateway between the worlds.
Yeah.
You
Or if you
know,
want
and
to, yeah, or if you want to use, a religious metaphor, it's like purgatory. You're sort of halfway between, and I know that's not literally what the concept of purgatory is, but
or
that's sort of
the holy ground that you're in between, like the sacred and the profane.
right.
That
Yeah.
you're on
Yeah.
holy ground. You're not like in a different plane of existence, but you're in that in between area. You're the ground you're on is sacred.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No
so
man's
yeah.
land.
Yeah, this is like this. Yeah, this the gateway,
Limbo. There you go, Joe.
of
Limbo.
course,
That's
and
a
of
good,
course,
yeah.
you literally have the guardians of the gateway.
Yes.
So
Exactly. It's
very, very, Campbellian.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, very much. And this first one of these interstitial pieces at the beginning of part one is titled "Fathers and Angels," and it is a sort of brief section of Wes's conversation with the other Wes, where they talk about, or they don't really, we don't really get into in depth, but they start to talk about their fathers,
Yeah,
both of whom were absent for them for most of their childhoods, but for different reasons.
yeah, and one of the discussion questions, when I went looking for, um, what I wanted to do to work with the book, comes from the end of this section. I was taught to remember but never question. Wes was taught to forget and never ask why,
Mhm.
and asking what he means by that. And I'm still not sure, to be honest. It sounds, especially having read the book, coming back
Mhm.
to it, um, it sounds like he's pointing out, it's there's a parallelism there,
Yeah.
and it sounds more rhetorical than, I mean, what was he taught to forget? I mean, because I don't think he was necessarily taught like to forget about his dad.
But I guess maybe it was a subject that he wasn't encouraged to bring up. Well, because what happens, and we'll talk about it in more detail in a minute, because it's the primary subject of the first chapter. But Wes, the author, his father died when he was very young, and Wes, the prisoner, his father left. So, and actually in the chat, Loretta Reyes asked, "Do the reasons really matter?" And I think one of the points of this part of the book is that they kind of do. Part of the mission of the book is to explore how these two guys with so many similarities wound up in such different places, and they did both lose their fathers very early in their lives, but I think the particular circumstances that led to those losses are very significant. And I mean, it's we're one chapter in, and they're only a few years old at this point in the book, and you can't chalk up everything in someone's life to some formative experience that happened when they were 3 or 4 years old, but it does matter. I mean,
Yeah.
it does have an influence. So
And
the
I think
fact,
that's
yeah,
one of the things that the book does well, is it shows how, because he talks about in the introduction, he says life, he overplays it in the introduction, I think. Life and death, freedom and bondage hang in the balance of every action we take. And I'm just
yeah,
like, no, but it can have like a snowball effect, and we sort of
yeah.
see
Our
that,
decisions do matter. Yeah,
yeah, each decision matters a little bit, and they do add up, small things. It's a lot of times it's not necessarily the big things, but it's the small things that we're not paying attention to. It's not just the fact that they both lost their fathers. As the other Wes says, your father wasn't there because he couldn't be. My father wasn't there because he chose not to be. We're
Yes,
going to mourn their absence in different ways.
exactly. And that's significant.
Yeah.
That's significant. Um,
And then it's nice because they take that conversation, break it up with the description of the author coming to Jessup and what it's like to come in, be, interrogated by the guards and, sort of searched and then, sat across from the prisoners, and then they go back to the conversation. And so they both sit there, they talk for a little bit and then they lapse into silence, and then it moves into chapter 1. Bye, Sarah. You may already be gone, but thank you so much for stopping by.
yeah. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the show when you come back to it, if you
Yep.
do.
We'll be thinking of you.
Yeah. So you want to move on to chapter 1?
Chapter 1 is Daddy Coming With Us.
And the year is 1982.
It's a long time ago,
Yeah.
you guys.
I was only 2 years old.
You veritable child,
Yeah,
Steve.
you were the ripe old age of 4, I believe.
Woohoo!
So, and we begin from Wes, the author's perspective,
Yes.
and he is telling us about an incident when he was, I think he's about what, 4 here, 3 or 4.
Yeah, he's
3. I think he's 3. He's 3. I just saw further down the page when his father and his mother are talking. So Wes is 3 at this point,
yeah.
and he's sort of playing with his older sister. And they would like chase each other around and kind of horse around.
Yeah. And
And
it's important that it is his older sister.
his older
Someone who's
sister,
bigger than he is.
significantly older. She's 7 years older than he. So if he's 3, then she's 10. And they're just kind of horsing around. And at one point, Wes hits her. He punches her.
Yeah, like
And
they're literally running around and he can't catch her because he's 3 and she's 10. But apparently either she lets them catch her or, he circles around and he grabs her, and then he decides, because, he's 3.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to punch her.
And he punches her. And of course, the moment he punches her is the moment that his mom walks into the room. And all she sees is her son punching her daughter. And she kind of flips out a little bit. And tells him to get up to his room and says, don't you ever put your hands on a woman like that. And Wes doesn't know like what's going on. And he goes up to his room, and while he's sort of sulking in his room, he can hear his parents downstairs talking about it, arguing about it, and not having like a heated argument, but just, sort of having a disagreement about it. And his father is saying to his mother, like, he's 3. He doesn't even understand what he did wrong.
Yeah.
You can't just tell him, don't put your hands on a woman. Like, he doesn't understand what he did wrong. So you can't just, jump on his ass like that. And then, of course, and then later his father comes in and sort of gently explain things to him. And tries to get him to understand.
So we go back then. We have some description of him and his sister.
Right.
And then we go flashback to his mom being born in Jamaica.
Yes.
And then his grandparents, his maternal grandparents, come into the States and moving into New York City. And
how she becomes Americanized.
Mm-hmm.
and eventually she moves to from New York to DC to go to college, and she joins a student group in college that is the OASATAU, or the Organization of African and African American Students at the American University, which is like a student activist organization for Black students, and it's there that she meets the guy who eventually becomes her first husband, not Wes's father, but Nikki's father, his sister's father, who is Bill.
And so this would have been the late 60s.
60, well, it says in the text, it says she started college in 68. So yeah.
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 Yeah. So I was doing math back from, okay, if it's 82 and he's 3 and she's 7 years older than him, doing math, math.
Yeah.
You know, they probably met. And so he is he's I mean, in the late 60s, he does drugs also.
Yes. And that
And
eventually becomes like a big problem for him.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she thought of it as, just recreational, but he has more of a problem than she'd realized, or honestly probably than he'd realized either.
Yeah.
And he comes home and he's yelling, and he grabs her by the shoulders and hits her, and she
threatens her, tries to like bully her into doing the dishes, like is just, yeah, really, really abusive.
and she gets a knife.
Yeah.
And she says, if you I will kill you, do that again.
Yeah.
And a month a month later she leaves him. And that's sort of where this explosive, like, no, that's not okay, just very sudden, even though Nikki is so much bigger than Wes, she sees that happening.
Yeah.
And so it flashes forward again to his father coming in to explain what's going on.
Right. And he just he sort of takes Wes on his knee, and he says, you can't hit people, and you especially can't hit women. He tells Wes, you must defend them, not fight them, which is a little paternalistic, but at the same time,
It's
if you're it's
1982.
1982 and he's 3, and it's like, do you want him, if you want to drill it into his head at a young age that it's especially not okay for a man to hit a woman, then that's as good a way to do it as any.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charles Chapman points out
yeah.
the way that abuse can be passed on from one generation to the next. His mom doesn't realize that her discipline method is a seed from her abuse.
Oh yeah.
Possibly not so much from her abuse at the hands of her husband, but I mean, there's definitely a mention of her having, quote, Thomas hands, like that he got whooped.
Yes.
And that's from her, the way that she was raised by her parents. I mean, I don't put my oar in a lot about that, since I haven't raised any kids. And I was spanked as a kid and I came out okay, but at the same time, just as a teacher, like, you model what you want to see. It's part of the reason that I push myself as much as I do to respond, to get students quality feedback as soon as I can, to be honest about what I'm doing. I never give things that I think of as stuff to keep them busy. people have accused me of that, but I mean, them's fighting words with me. I believe in what I'm asking you to do, or I wouldn't ask you to do it. So in the same way, even though I was physically disciplined as a kid, it's difficult for me to, as somebody who believes that violence is not always is often unnecessary. It's difficult for me to get behind spankings or beatings, or even raising your voice in anger, as opposed to I mean, my family, we yell at each other all the time. Like, not like yell at each other,
Not
but
like in anger.
all
Yeah.
across the room. Hey, can you bring me the remote? Or, hey, can you bring me the phone? Just
Right.
instead of, getting up and going to talk to somebody, we just yell across the house. And so I don't know. I don't know what I would do as a parent. I mean, safety issue, I can see, if your kid's walking over and you notice that the little safety cover isn't on the outlet, you grab them, you pop them on. It's like, no.
Right. Yeah.
There is a fear behind that.
And sometimes it is, just it's just a reflexive reaction. And that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to avoid it, but it's not necessarily, premeditated or because you are a generally abusive person. It could just be, you see your kid about to do something really dangerous and you kind of flip out for a second and like, what? Oh, no, no, no. Like, stop it. And, it doesn't make it okay, but it's a different kind of violence than someone who is habitually abusive.
Yeah. Or even then, spanking as punishment.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, haven't raised kids, got spanked myself, and ended up, somebody who I have a close relationship with my parents, and I still, think that there are, it is possible to raise kids without spanking them.
Yeah.
And, that's a more effective, it teaches them when you punish with violence, you teach that might makes right. That's essentially, I'm bigger than you and I can make you do what I want. And
it's not okay. And it's not a good lesson to teach children that that's a good way to be. And as far as you and your parents, you're playing the long game and waiting for your perfect opportunity for revenge. And I respect that.
You're wrong, but that's okay. I forgive you.
So then we get some backstory on Wes's dad.
Yes.
Who was also named Wes.
Yes.
And who was he was actually a journalist. He hosted his own radio show in the Washington, D.C. area, which is pretty cool, I think. And that's actually where he and Wes's mom met. And Wes's mom, I don't know if we mentioned it. Now, Wes's mom's name is Joy. And that's where Wes Sr. and Joy met, because Joy came to work for him as a production assistant or a writing assistant. And they kind of hit it off that way and eventually started dating and got married. Wes Sr. he loved Nikki, who was her daughter from the previous marriage to Bill. And eventually they had their own child, their own biological child, which was Wes, the author.
And then there's also so Wes's father gets sick, or is not feeling well in a very specific and unusual way.
Yeah.
And
he's having trouble breathing. His throat is closing up. Yeah.
Yeah. And he so he comes home late, and he can't, he apparently like has an evening radio program.
Yeah. So
So he gets
so he gets home late. Yeah.
yeah, he gets home late, and apparently that's not unusual. But he wakes his mom say he should go to the hospital, and he drives himself, and she goes to meet him in the ER, and they think that he's got a sore throat and hasn't been sleeping well, and they anesthetize his throat to deal with the pain, but they keep asking about his medical history and his mental state. Does he often exaggerate? Would he make up the symptoms? Because the symptoms are unusual,
Yeah.
but and he's released from the hospital, told to get some rest.
Yeah. Basically, they just send him
And
home. Yeah.
yeah, and that's it's something, having your symptoms dismissed is something that, if you're not white, can be difficult to deal with, because
Yeah.
of, if you escalate it and insist, then you can become, the angry person. Your
Right.
anger is seen as, you're being illogical and unreasonable, instead of justified for not being taken seriously about your own body.
Yeah. And also, we should mention, in addition to being black, Wes also tells us that it was like 7 o'clock in the morning when his dad woke up and said, "I have to go to the hospital," and he just kind of threw on some clothes,
Yeah.
so he's looking a little shabby when he gets to the hospital. And that is also, Wes also tells us later that he thinks that perhaps that was a factor in the doctors dismissing him as well. It's not just that he was black, but that he read as kind of a poor black person. It's like, well,
Mhm.
he's just some guy who wandered in off the street wearing
Looking
some
for that.
ratty looking clothes. And yeah, and so they just sort of thought, well, yeah, he's homeless, or he has a drug problem, or he's an alcoholic or whatever. And
And
you
especially,
know
if his throat's closing up, he's going to have difficulty communicating.
yeah.
So he may not be speaking clearly. Um, so
But yeah,
uh,
so Wes's dad goes home and does not get better.
yeah,
And eventually he gets up, and I think he's on his way down the stairs, and he collapses. And they call the ambulance, and the ambulance takes him back to the hospital. And the family goes to the hospital to see about him, and they're in the emergency room waiting room, and one of the ER doctors comes out and tells them that he's dead. Um, and Wes sort of sums it up for us and says that he was dead 5 hours after being released from the hospital, after being told to get some sleep. Like he was just there, and they could have, and it turns out, after they do an autopsy, it turns out the condition that he had was treatable. It was rare, and it was like some kind of a viral infection, but it was not a death sentence. Like, they could have treated him and he would have been fine. But
yeah,
they dismissed him. They assumed that he didn't know what he was talking about as far as his own symptoms. They assumed that he was being deceitful or exaggerating in some way, and they sent him home, and he died. And that obviously had a big effect on young Wes, you know, as surely it would to any of us if we were in the same position. Um, but especially a young black person in Baltimore in the United States, who is probably going to grow up and deal with similar situations repeatedly throughout his life, of being dismissed or viewed with suspicion
yeah.
just because of the fact that he's black.
And as some random geek pointed out, and as you brought up, because of the clothes,
Yeah.
you know, you shouldn't have to go. You shouldn't have to dress up to go to the ER and be
No,
taken seriously.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. It should make no difference whether he is read as, you know, lower class or not. It should be irrelevant. It should be, let's find out what's wrong with him. Let's help him. Not, oh, look how he's dressed. He's probably a poor person. He's probably just making it up anyway. Just send him home. You know. Oh, and then we get the
Charles
yeah.
Chapman mentions, I like his use of the term "mommy hears a shit from my mother," but he does kind of go back and forth. Mommy pushed past me and told Nikki to call 911. Finally, my mother told me to go outside with Nikki. And then we get again, mommy quickly loaded us into the car. He asked to see my mother alone. So it kind of goes back and forth. So yeah, it's yeah, Loretta, it's and that's one of the things that I talk to students about, the importance of being able to advocate for yourself effectively. And that becomes much harder if you're, if you're not a straight white guy, and specifically a fit young straight white guy, because, and to some degree, medicine is a numbers game. If you're overweight, often the first thing that they'll say is, well, have you tried exercise? What's your, how do you eat, and and they'll go into that first, because there can be a correlation, and it may not even correlation and causation are not the same thing, but they'll go with what they know first, and they may not follow up. And that's what happened here. They didn't follow up, but they're just like, they wrote it off instead of looking, continuing to pursue it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and then we get this absolutely wrenching scene from the father's funeral.
Yeah.
Where, because again, and remember, Wes, the author, is 3 at this point. He's just a little kid, and he doesn't quite understand what has happened. Like, he knows that something bad has happened, but he hasn't quite sort of come to terms or come to an understanding of what it means that his father is dead. And there's this description of his father's funeral, where he sees his dad's body in the casket, and he looked like he was just lying there peacefully, like the old sort of cliche, like, oh, he looks like he's asleep. And he doesn't say that, but that's sort of the impression that you're given.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes it. He says, he looked at peace. I was holding my Uncle Vin's hand when I looked into the casket and asked my father, Daddy, are you going to come with us? And that's just holy shit. I mean, that'll just knock the wind out of you.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the end of the section of the chapter with the author.
That's and then we switch perspective now to the other Westmore.
Mm-hmm. So you get a section break there, and then one of the challenges that students often face is they're both called Westmore, and you get 3 chapters and you're like, wait, which one is it? Because it doesn't always start the chapter with the author.
Right.
And so you have to pay attention to the use of pronouns. So this one, Wes reluctantly got up from the red plaid couch and turned off the television, but the truth was that he liked going. So it doesn't use first person except in dialogue when people say things. So
that's an easy way to tell. Third person is the other Wes. First person is the author.
You
Yeah.
say easy, but it's something I point out to the students to help them because they get confused. Like, as you know, we are far more experienced. We're way older than they are.
I
We're
know they're only
so much
15.
older, and the experience tells.
They're only 15, and many of them are probably not, terribly avid readers, unfortunately. So,
Yeah. I don't remember. I don't remember pointing it out to the honors students this year, actually. But usually, if they start talking about being confused, I'll point that out to them.
mhm.
But it's something I make if for my non-honor students who are generally not readers, and some of the honor students just aren't readers. They don't enjoy reading. Yeah, if you're
They're
not
just
aware of
grade
it,
grubbers.
or they have pushy parents,
Yeah, yeah.
or they're curious sometimes, but or they have older siblings who uh excelled academically, and so they felt pressure to do the same and ended up in honors classes, even though that's not where their interests were. So yeah, so we go, and the other Wes's mother's name is Mary.
Yes. Mary Moore, which sounds just like a Marvel Comics name.
Alas, no heroics here.
No, no, sadly not. But yeah, so and in the scene that we enter when we start this section, the other Wes, young Wes, is getting ready to go over to his grandmother's house. And this grandmother is his father's mother, and his father is not in his life at this point, but that grandmother is still very much an active part of his life, and loves him and looks at and tries to look after him. And his mom is getting him ready to go spend the night with his grandmother, because she has just received some bad news, and she needs sort of some time to herself to kind of think things over. And probably it's not said explicitly, but it's sort of implied that she's going to go out and maybe kind of blow off some steam, have a good time, try to forget about what's going on in her life. And she's sending the kid to to grandma's house for the night.
Yeah, I remember applying for the Pell Grant, not getting it.
Yeah, because that's what the bad news is.
Yeah.
I mean, she does have a job, but she also is going to college, and she uh had gotten a Pell Grant, and that money was essential for her to keep her bills, to not only stay in school but to keep her bills paid and keep the lights on. And then she just had
Funding gets
received,
cut.
huh?
Funding gets cut.
Yeah, she just received notice that, yeah, she had lost her Pell Grant. Like, the funding was cut and she lost her Pell Grant. Thanks, Reagan. And Reagan is explicitly implicated by the way, which I absolutely love, because fuck Ronald Reagan. Yeah. So she knows that she's losing this absolutely necessary funding, and she's, as you would, she's having a really rough time dealing with it. And she wants to get the kid out of the house so she can go do something else for a while.
Yeah. So yeah. Ay, ay, ay. She had she did get her associates, but she'd hoped to get her bachelor's.
Right. Right. That's what she was going for when the grant was cut, right?
Yeah. I would. Charles says, disagreeing about the heroism. She may not have been a superhero and might have made some mistakes, but being an active parent who cares for her kids is heroic. There is some heroism there. I think it's the way it's framed is in this chapter is that sense of loss. That, I mean, that, you know, Wes, the author, frames this as pivotal for Mary.
Yeah.
Because she does have her associates, but that, you know, that lack of momentum going forward, it becomes a real, you know, I mean, stopping point. You know, that loss of momentum becomes
Yeah.
inertia in a way that keeps them stuck.
Yeah. And it's especially crushing for her because we haven't mentioned this yet, but it's I thought it was one of the more nicely written sections or nicely written sort of paragraphs of this chapter. Uh, the school that she's going to when she loses her Pell Grant is Johns Hopkins University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in the country, and in Baltimore especially so.
Yeah.
Is a really prestigious school. But the thing about Johns Hopkins, as we're told in the paragraph, is that most of the people who go there aren't from Baltimore. And it says it was a school largely for people from out of town, preppies who observed the surrounding neighborhood with a voyeuristic curiosity when they weren't hatching myths about it to scare freshmen. This city wasn't their home. And so Mary, as someone who did have her home there, she wasn't just going to college; she was going to this college in her hometown that, to most people who lived there, was viewed as this kind of unattainable place.
The ivory tower.
Yeah, and she had made it in, and now she was going to have to give it
I
up.
mean, just, yeah.
She was going to have to give it up, not because she flunked out or she couldn't hack it, but because she lost her funding. And that's that on top of everything else. That's just devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also hear that the section of Baltimore where Mary grew up and where they still lived was a section of town that was particularly damaged during the riots following the assassination of Martin Luther King, and that it had never at this point it hadn't quite come back from that. It was still sort of a damaged part of town, and that Pennsylvania Avenue, which is specifically the street where they lived, took more damage than other places. It was really messed up by the riots after the King assassination. So that's sort of part of the context in which Mary is living, and in which Wes is living too.
Yeah. And then we see something similar in Mary's mom. That her kid, she goes into kidney failure.
Yes. Yes.
And
well, thank you for the super chat, Loretta. Appreciate it. Yeah, and unlike the author Wes's dad, which was a very acute, sudden thing, the medical condition that Mary's mom develops is it's a very long, drawn
ongoing,
out thing.
yeah.
I mean, she loses weight. It has a devastating effect on her physically. Um, you know, and eventually she dies too.
Yeah.
She needs a kidney transplant, and she gets one, uh, but her body rejects the kidney and she dies. And that has a very negative effect on her husband, on Mary's dad, Kenneth, who who already was beset by problems. He was a drunk, but he would only drink on the weekends. You know, he could
Mhm.
hold down a job, and he was what I guess he would be what you would call a functional alcoholic. But after Mary died, he kind of goes on a bender, and his problems become a lot more difficult for him to hold at bay. Like there's even the moment when he informs his children that their mom is dead. It's told to us that he was drunk when he broke the news to them, and it's described as he took one final swig of rum before calling the kids together. Sorry guys, mom's dead. He finally blurted out, blunt to the point of absurdity. So that's that's how the other Westmore's mom grew up.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, the parallel there that I'm seeing to the author's dad is striking.
Very much. Very
Uh,
much.
but then, and then also just um, the response to trauma and the turning to drugs, because we don't we almost Mary's maternal grandparents move in and help take care of the family, where Kenneth, her dad, is not dealing with it well, and we don't find
No.
anything out about his parents.
No.
Whereas um the author's mom, Joy, gets help from her own parents when
Mhm.
her husband dies.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting. And then we also we see the same thing, of course. The other Wes's mom, her mom's dead, and her dad is not particularly helpful. So again, it's like the person that she turns to is like Wes's father's mother.
Mother. Yeah.
Like, it's not somebody that she is that has been there for her whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
it's more removed as a connection, but there is still that some of that connection there. But and also it's just one person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just Wes's dad's mom,
It's
not.
not a support system.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah.
The other West, the support there is much more fragmented.
Mhm.
And then of course the reference to Joy leaving Bill because of his drug and alcohol problem, that she's able to do that. She has support from her parents to, I mean, she's got a kid at that time, and she has support from her family that enables her to move on and you know
Mhm.
move forward. And again, we see that Mary repeatedly you know is limited in her options, is more limited than the author's family is.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, we get an account of the other Wes's mom, Mary, meeting his father, Bernard, and again, it's in contrast to the author's parents. Mary and Bernard are not together very long at all. They are together long enough for Mary to get pregnant with Wes, and then Bernard kind of takes off. And we're told that he had trouble finding a job, and he also had a drinking problem that sort of consumed him, and um, and he left, and he was not in Wes's life really at all. We're told about an incident. Um, it says about 8 months after Wes was born, when he shows up at Mary's house, and she was staying with her sister, and he just kind of shows up drunk, wanting to talk to her, and just kind of banging on the door. Um, and and then finally he just sort of leaves, and Wes was a baby, and we're told that Wes slept through the whole thing anyway.
Yeah.
And then that was it were that section ends with the line, "That was the last time he tried to see his son." So the contrast of, the author Wes's father seemed to be a very loving, attentive, involved parent who died because he was uh, neglected and treated wrongly by doctors. And the other Wes's dad was someone who left before he was born, and apparently was never uh, chose to never even be a part of his life.
Yeah.
Um, at least chose to the extent that he could choose, because he obviously had problems, uh, you know, but was alive and around, but was just not part of his child's life. At least not at first, because that's kind of the note that we leave the chapter on. Because after we get all this backstory about the other Wes's parents, we come back to that scene of Wes
Going to his grandmother's.
going to his grandmother's, his mammies, or mamies, as she's called in the text, and they they go to grandma's house, and he gets to grandma's house, and he's excited to go to grandma's house because he likes being there, and she obviously loves him. And uh, he goes inside, and there's this guy sitting on the couch that he's never seen before. And we're told that he smelled like whiskey, and he's just kind of leaning on the couch. And his mom walks in with him, and the guy on the couch says, "Hey, Mary, damn, you look good." And Mary just kind of just kind of shrugs him off and just goes, "Hey," and like, oh boy, here we go. But doesn't seem happy to see him.
Yeah.
Uh, and then young Wes kind of looks up at his mom for some explanation. Um, and the guy on the couch looks at Wes and says to Mary, "Who's this?" And you can't really tell from the description how he says it. If he is, I mean, we're given to believe that he's drunk, so he may earnestly be asking, like, who this kid is. Like, it doesn't register with him that this is his son. Or maybe he's being kind of conversational, like, "Who's this?" Like, sort of prompting her. But either way, Mary doesn't like it, and we're told that she rolls her eyes, and the description is she could not believe his audacity. Um, and then Mary looks down at Wes, and we end the chapter with Mary saying to the other Wes, "Meet your father," because of course that's his father, smelling like whiskey on the couch at his grandma's house. Um, and that's the first time that they have actually met, that Wes could remember. Um, and that's the end of the chapter.
Hmm.
So,
And I'm thinking, I'm looking back. We also had found out that, remember, Wes has an older brother, Tony.
yes, from
Like,
a previous relationship,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
like
of his
Bernard,
mom.
though, had also had alcohol problems.
Yes.
And Tony isn't with Wes when Wes is taken to Mamie's.
Right.
Tony spends a fair amount of time with his dad, who has drug and alcohol problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that becomes difficult later on. And then earlier, because I went back and looked, his older half, Wes's older, the other Wes's half brother, Tony, spent most of his time with his maternal grandparents, which means Mary's dad, I guess,
Yeah.
who also has alcohol problems.
Yeah. So you're
I mean,
sort of, you're
have
sensing a pattern. Yeah.
Tony doesn't have anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's just that, that ongoing response to trauma and to not having a support system, and, it becoming cyclical, that you don't have anyone who can help you when you're hurting, and there's nobody to give you a hug and to help out, and there are other ways to stop hurting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it goes. Yeah, that lack of a support system.
But then when that becomes your habit, you can't support anybody else either.
No, and then once it becomes a habit, it's not as simple as, well, I'll just stop doing this.
Yeah.
Like you sort of, you start out at first as a way of forgetting about your troubles or finding some solace, and by the time it becomes a problem, it's, you no longer have the option to just stop.
Yeah.
Because you've
That's something that
become
I think this
dependent
chapter
on it.
does not do well, is it doesn't, like, it I don't think it deliberately glosses over the lack of support, but it doesn't, I mean, there's a pattern there in Mary's life.
Oh, yes.
That is not emphasized in this chapter. It's, it's the, and like it goes right, it blows right past the bit about Tony being left, that Tony either is left or goes off with, is old enough to go off by himself, and he stays with his dad, or he stays with Mary's dad, both of whom have drug and alcohol problems. And, Mary's got Wes, who's younger, that she's trying to take care of, and has some help from Mamie, but Mamie has no connection to Tony.
Right.
And kind of like Charles Chapman points out, it's hard for people to love someone they don't know or that they're not connected to. The whole idea of, well, that's your family. And, that's, Tony, Wes is Mamie's grandchild, her blood grandchild. But for whatever reason, Tony isn't, Tony doesn't become part of that.
Yeah.
He's left out, and he's kind of he's not on his own. He's getting, connected to people who, can't care for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also noticed sort of an interesting parallel between the two fathers, between the fathers of the two Wesses, which is that the author Wes's father died because the doctors at the hospital took him to be the kind of person that the other Wes's father actually is. That the other Wes's father, we're shown, is someone who does legitimately struggle with alcohol, with finding a job, He, when we see him at the end of the chapter here, the first time he meets his son, he's on his mother's couch, smelling of whiskey. Um, and the implication is that when the author Wes's father goes to the hospital, um, he is treated as though he is that kind of person, and he is though the prejudices that people have toward the poor, the drug addicted, the alcoholic, and also black people are inflicted upon him because they assume that that applies to him when it doesn't. And it actually does apply to the other Wes's father.
Yeah. And of course, none of that should matter.
No,
Like,
none of it. No, none of it should
the
matter.
other Wes's father needed emergency care, it shouldn't matter if he has, a drug and or alcohol problem, or, if he's an addict, he should,
Yeah.
I mean, I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, none of absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of it should matter, but it did matter in the sense that the author's father died in part because
Because
of
of
those prejudices, even though they did not actually
they
apply to
didn't even
him.
apply. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Except for him being black. He really was
Except
black.
for him, yeah, him being black. But yeah, the other stuff, the sort of conclusions that we are led to believe the doctors jumped to because of the way he was dressed and the way he was acting, and the way he was acting was due to his medical condition.
Yeah.
Like they were, it's sort of, you're also led to believe that, like, well, because he was having a hard time staying awake and he couldn't keep his head straight, like literally his head was like slumping over, like his neck couldn't
And
hold up his head.
and that's literally how Wes's father, the other Wes's father, is described.
Yeah.
The hangover lean.
Yeah, the hangover lean. And that's what the doctors saw. And it wasn't because he was a drunk, and it wasn't because he was living in poverty or whatever. It was because he was sick and he needed help, which is why he came to the hospital.
Yeah.
But they completely ignored that.
Yeah, they saw what they thought was a hangover lean, essentially told him to go sleep it off.
Yeah. 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 So that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's a parallel that I hadn't seen before. But yeah, the whole head tilted to the side there.
Yeah.
Is something that's visually, I mean, it's just words on a page, but giving that visualization of it, yeah, there's definitely parallel.
And it's too, we talk about this as a piece of nonfiction, and we'll talk about, like, the what things mean and the implications of things, but as a piece of writing, that the fact that the author Westmore gave us those parallel images and resisted the urge to draw a straight line between them so that we couldn't possibly miss it is something that I really admire. That speaks to me that he's not just like a journalist or somebody, trying to write a report about this or whatever, that he is actually a writer with a great deal of artistic merit, because I mean, that is a very writerly choice to make, to have that restraint and to give us those parallel images of the two fathers in different contexts for different reasons, sort of slumped over to the side, not able to hold their heads up, and to allow us to make that connection ourselves instead of saying, just like my father, to make sure that we get it. He doesn't do that, which I think is very smart and a mark of really, really good writing.
But it's also a risk.
Oh yeah, because we might not get it. Yeah, that's right.
Dude, I've taught this book for years. Yeah. So you pointed it out. I didn't get
it. Well, now you can. The next time you teach the book to students.
The next time I teach the book, which depending, I might not.
Right. Hey, what guys? Yeah.
Because I didn't actually get to talk to the assistant principal that I've been working with on this, but there's the possibility of moving to world literature, which this is not.
Right.
Next year, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Well, I'll remind you, even if it's many, many years from now, if you ever teach this book again, I will remind you.
So, all right. Any other observations?
I don't have any. No, I mean, I will just say, just generally speaking, I mean, we're only an introduction and a chapter in, but so far it's a really good book. I mean, just evaluating it just as a book, just as a piece of writing, in addition to all of the social issues that it gives us an opportunity to think about and talk about, which is just even makes it even more,
Mhm.
you know, valuable and more interesting to talk about. Like just as a piece of writing, I think it's good so far. It's really good
Mhm.
so far. So yeah.
Yeah, Loretta says what matters perhaps more than anything for many seeking success is solid connections.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. For sure.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
it's important.
Jamie J says that she likes my lighting. It's just blue lights on the back wall. That's literally all it is. But I'm glad you like it.
Are you feeling blue, Steve?
Oh, not really.
Okay, good. I was worried your head tilted to the side there.
Ooh,
Gasp.
too soon, Dana. How dare you make light of it?
Dude, this was written back in, or it was published back in 2010.
Oh, okay. Like 11 years is long enough. I mean, I was making 9/11 jokes like literally that day. So, I think that's been long enough.
Oh, you absolute asshole, Steve.
I'm a monster.
You, she says admiringly.
Smile when you say that. Yeah, so yeah, we'll come back to this in 2 weeks because of course next Friday will be my next Ask Away, but then the week after that we'll be back and we'll talk about chapter 2, and we will also, you say, we'll discuss the first couple of question or the first couple of statements on
Sort of.
the Likert
We
scale.
will we will discuss two of them. I have them picked out already.
Oh boy, not the
Oh, I'm
first,
so
not
excited.
necessarily the first two, but two of them.
Two of them.
Okay,
And it's
cool.
I will tell you, it's not the first two.
Oh boy,
We'll make a point of that. But
non-linear storytelling.
I won't tell you until after you do your answers.
Okay, yeah, and I will,
I might send it to you.
and thank you for reminding me because I want to do those right after we get off
Oh,
the
how
air,
exciting.
so I can just have it done and I don't forget about it. Um, but
Well, it's
yeah,
almost 8 o'clock. Do you have wrestling tonight?
no wrestling tonight.
No wrestling
No
tonight. Okay.
wrestling tonight.
I didn't want to, I didn't. I was gonna say, look, we gotta go.
Yeah,
Get this
come
done
on.
because you.
No,
Well, I will forget after wrestling, but you might remember. There is the.
there is wrestling on tonight, but it ain't wrestling that I watch.
Oh, is it?
It,
Is it that other
it's
company?
the Evil Empire. Um, it's the Evil Empire. So which I do, of which I do not partake. So actually,
the
it's funny. The I sometimes, I can't, sometimes I
the
can't help
Evil
myself.
Empire, or am I doing threes or evils? I can't tell. Evil Empire
Other way.
this way.
Say something else. Hang on.
Evil Empire. Is that the Evil Empire?
That's right.
That's the Evil
Yes,
Empire.
that's
And you
right.
know what the Evil Empire is? Da da da. Some random geek, unfortunately, it's kind of redundant, isn't it? I mean,
Evil Empire. Yeah.
yeah,
What was the good empire?
the
Like what
beneficent empire. No,
what's the empire that people look back on fondly and go, now
they're like,
there
oh yeah.
there was a hell of an empire, boy.
Well, apparently the Russian one, if you're Don Bluth.
Ah, the good old days. The czars. Everybody
Petersburg is
loved the
illuminated.
czars.
Oh, for the days of Imperial Russia. You know, they have a whole series of songs about it.
Exactly.
There's
Jamie,
sparkles.
not only indie wrestling. No, it's, I watch my main wrestling that I watch now is AEW, which I think is too big of a company to be indie. Like when you have a time slot on TNT, you're not indie anymore. um, but yeah, not WWE. I'm okay with pretty much everything except for WWE because they're the evil empire. And actually, I was going to say sometimes I can't help myself. And in the script for next week's Trek Actually video, which I was writing today, there is, I think I was working on it today, but this joke is something that I wrote yesterday. There is a WWE related joke in there that is a cheap shot at their terrible storytelling. So it fits sort
Steve,
of with yes,
Steve,
yes, Dana.
you're a nerd.
I know.
And you say that with such pride. I'm so glad.
I mean,
Own it, man. I'm so glad that you own it.
once you have spoken publicly of the fact that you love professional wrestling, you lose all like
Sense
you
of
have
shame.
huh?
Sense of shame.
Well, yeah, I guess you pretty much have to accept stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like once I've gone public, like guys, seriously, I genuinely love professional wrestling. Like, what am I embarrassed about after that? You know, like, don't let them find out I like Phil Collins songs, dude. They already know you love pro wrestling. Okay, good point. I
What's wrong
mean,
with Phil Collins?
nothing at all.
I mean, like, why would anybody shame somebody for liking Phil
Okay,
Collins?
okay. Here's another one. And this again, this is completely sincere. I promise. I like a lot of this stuff. I mean, some of it I like ironically because it's like so bad it's good, but a lot of it I genuinely, sincerely love. Well,
Okay.
and we'll see if this is worse than Phil Collins as far as you're concerned. Okay, Michael Bolton.
Yeah, I would say Michael Bolton is not. I would say Phil Collins is better than Michael Bolton.
So would I.
Yeah.
But Michael Bolton, I genuinely, there are Michael Bolton songs that I listen to and I absolutely enjoy them. And like,
You
it's
sing
not like,
along.
huh?
You sing along, right?
Sure. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
I'm down with just about anything that's singable.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Except I will sing Word Crimes instead of the non-Weird Al version.
Because the original is a little rapey.
Well, I will say I'm not even fond of Word Crimes because, as you know, I am not a member of the Grammar Police.
Yeah, that's correct.
But at the same time, I do. I also do espouse being aware of the prejudices that surround us and the generally accepted use of standard English. So there is that. So it's important to be aware of these things. And so in that case, in that sense, I do. Plus it's it's nice little. It's a really groovy little beat, and he plays it up too. It's the synth on that is great.
Do you also? I think someone mentioned this on our show on Wednesday because I sang a little bit of "Our Love's in Jeopardy," but to different lyrics. And somebody in the chat, it might have been some random geeks who said I always sing "I Lost on Jeopardy," which is the Weird Al version of that song. I mean, is that another one? You like that song comes on and you automatically go into the Weird Al version instead of the original?
Nope.
Because the Weird Al version of that is great. And the video is hilarious, but I also enjoy the original as well. But
aw, you're apparently one of Jamie J's heroes.
Aw, and that will not be killed. Sweet.
Bonus.
I like being somebody's hero, and I really like not being killed.
I'm in favor of not being killed.
I'm in favor of not being killed for me, especially.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, other people, I'll go case by case, but for me, don't kill me.
That's she's gone. Sarah, if you're watching this, that's humanity level 4. Some people just gotta die.
Some people just gotta die. Hey, come on.
Just gotta die. It's okay, Humanity. I think
you read that to me because that sounds familiar. You read that passage from the book to me.
I'm like, humanity 4? Really? I mean, I think that's at least like a 5 because I feel like 6.
I love your quibbling over what number it is.
Well, 7
is that like 4?
Average 7 out of 10 is average humanity. And so, like,
okay, so 4 is you're already to, some people just got to die.
You're well on your way to, like, complete, like, lack of sapience, like, complete lack of awareness of your individuality. Right. And, like, you're way down there. And so, like, I think level 5 is, hey, people die, stuff breaks, something that happens. I'm like, that's 6, and 5 should be some people ought to die.
Right.
Let's just be honest. Let's just be honest. Now, I mean, because like level 5 should be some people ought to die. You don't do it because you're not supposed to. But
you're like inside you're like,
yeah.
yeah,
And level
totally.
4 is some people ought to die, and I'm here to help them along.
And I'm gonna kill him.
It's I'm just taking care of business.
I'm just doing what needs to be done.
Hey man, gosh, people just tick you off. You can just kill them. It's okay.
People get so uptight about it. I'm only killing people who ought to die. Jesus, relax.
And really, they're just people.
There's plenty more.
Gosh, yeah.
Didn't you ever see Orson Welles's
Disney had a whole song about it. It's called The Circle of Life, folks.
Orson Welles' Ferris wheel speech in The Third Man. It's a classic.
I'll take your word for it.
Oh, they're up really high, and he's like the people
that
just look like they're up really high on the Ferris wheel, and the people down below on the ground just look like little dots. And Orson Welles says, "Now tell me, old man, if I told you that you could have $10,000 for every one of those little dots that stopped moving, would you really tell me to keep my money?"
What does he say?
Well, he said, well, of course, he's talking to the hero. So the hero says, absolutely not. You're mad. You're a monster, But, the way Orson Welles says it, you're kind of watching the movie going, I don't know, maybe. Because it's Orson Welles. And you're like, maybe is he right? He might, yeah.
No, Jeannie, I think that goes the other direction. Like lower humanity is worse. The lower numbers are worse. Level 0 is when you lose your character. Like you succumb to the beast. You're just like, and then the other vampires kill you. Usually,
you become too much trouble even for the other vampires.
Well, but
they're just like, forget this guy.
Well, essentially, what happens then is the storyteller takes your character sheet away and says, "Make a new character." If you're that far gone, and then the storyteller can say whatever happens to your character happens. But usually, by the time because essentially the things that you choose to have your character do influence your character's humanity level. So that's a stat that can change based on the actions that you choose to have your character take. If you are behaving in a manner at consistently acting at a lower humanity level or at a higher humanity level, the storyteller can say, okay, roll your humanity, roll that score. And depending on how your roll turns out, your humanity score may be raised or lowered. So if you're consistently acting in a low humanity way, you're going to end up actually lowering your humanity. Mm-hmm. And so it's based on the actions that you choose to take that ends up with you either losing your character or changing those sorts of things about your character.
Because of neuroplasticity.
Because of storytelling.
Well.
And because of game rules.
Storytelling in a game, which is the most boring kind of storytelling, but go on.
Not necessarily. Let's be honest. There is plenty of boring storytelling that happens in movies, television.
That's true. You're right.
There's a lot of stuff.
It
is theoretically possible to tell a good story through a game.
I will take your word for that.
You should talk to Anita about that. I think she'd agree with me.
Oh, she would. She absolutely because she's a gamer. And well, no, I'll tell you, if we include video games, I have played video games that have had good stories.
But they have rules, Steve.
Yeah, it's not my favorite art form. I mean, obviously, I'm not, as I've said many times, I am not a gamer. I have played and enjoyed video games, but I do not consider myself a gamer.
I'm not sure what they were playing. But Glenn and Isabella sometimes will now the weather's nice, they'll go play games out on the back porch so that, they don't, so that I can have my microphone and they don't interrupt the show. It's very thoughtful of them. But yeah, there's some some random geek I don't know that tell great stories. I guess it depends on how broadly we go with great.
It depends. I will say, I mean, I don't know. I have never played a video game that had a story that I felt could be translated like directly to like a movie. without major changes that I would call a great story. But when you're playing the game, it's all about context. If when you're
Mhm.
playing the game, it's a great story. But
Yeah,
like,
it can be very immersive.
but like what I don't get, because and I know like a lot of people, because I talk about Star Trek a lot, and there are Star Trek games that have stories, and people will say like, oh, you don't have to play the game, just watch like the YouTube video that has all of the cutscenes, and you can just watch the story. I've never enjoyed a single one of those. Those are all
Yeah,
incredibly boring and just awful. And the same
because
thing
of
with
the
like they do the same thing like for the Batman Arkham games where they have like these really intricate complex stories and people like edit them together into like a fucking 2 or 3 hour movie, however long it takes to play through the game and get the whole story. And I'm just maybe when you're playing the game this is a great story, but just to sit here and watch, this is awful. This is just dull, boring bullshit.
it's
But when you're
it's
playing the
very different.
game, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, the element of, immersion and choice, and that um the investment created by, doing the work of, making choices about your character, the
sure.
investment helps to keep you involved. It's it gets progressively more difficult as you go on. So one of the things that I have been very interested about, I actually have some Coursera courses, maybe I'll get to them this summer, that I want to go into. I've wanted to do I wanted to look into doing my master's on storytelling and gaming,
Hmm.
and like how to incorporate what we've learned about player behavior through especially MMOs and incorporate that into instructional design to increase student engagement, the way that MMOs have like taken player behavior and stuff. I mean, because they constantly get all kinds of data, because they're what everything you freaking do in an MMO they watch,
Right.
because like it's their
It's the
servers.
game, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is the game. So they watch it and they determine what sorts of elements lead to increased player engagement. And they can tell based on how long you play the game, and what makes you spend money on, the game, and buy additional content and things like that. So they observe all of these things, and then they, collate all of that data. And so essentially that's part of why games get nerfed, is because it reduces that initial barrier to players. You make it impossible to fail. And so, but at the same time, you don't want that success to be meaningless. So you start it off and then you start increasing the difficulty in a way that makes increased success more meaningful, because you have to put more effort in. So it's
Right.
cycling through. And so, I think that as an educator, you can learn from that, because the way to build, what's currently referred to as grit, I would argue, is through the experience of meaningful success. And it's difficult to do that because it's going to be different for every student.
Hmm.
Each student is going to have, especially by the time they come to me, they've had massively different experiences academically, and they have there's a wide range of attitudes as well as skill levels. And especially considering that English has a broad variety of skills, a student who's a really good writer absolutely choke up when they need to speak or talk with others, or somebody who's, good at expressing their ideas may not be able to organize them well. They have good ideas, they're able to analyze what they read, but they can't explain it very well. So I mean, it's this huge skill set. And so it's really challenging to look at, okay, now I got a bunch of 30 of y'all. How am I going to make it apply to everybody? And with a
Yeah.
game, there's a lot more opportunity to structure it so that different players can make different choices and still be successful, albeit in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jamie J, I don't know if you can tell how I feel about it, but yes, I am all in
You're
favor
very
of
much in favor.
storytelling. So yeah,
Well, and I
gosh.
mean the idea of that, the context in which you are experiencing the
Mhm.
story is extremely important because
And
yeah, I
the
mean,
whole idea of the medium is the message.
yeah,
I disagree that the medium is the message, but
but
the
it's very
medium and
important.
the message are, tightly interwoven.
Yeah. Well, because like, I've talked, and actually in the video that I put up on Wednesday for my birthday video, the Godzilla versus Kong video, where I talk about it in terms of pro wrestling. And
I literally talked about that with one of my other teachers, Miss Gard, when we were talking about
really,
yes, because we were talking about world literature. And she said, it might be interesting instead of going at it thematically, looking at one particular world event like World War One or World War Two, and looking at different communities and different cultures and how they responded and how it
how they
affected
wrote about
others
it.
to a greater or lesser extent. I'm like, that's Godzilla. That's Godzilla.
Totally, yeah, absolutely.
And she's
Godzilla
like,
was
I've
absolutely.
never seen that movie. I'm like, I haven't either,
Uh,
but I've watched a YouTube video about it.
Godzilla is, yeah, but like, because like if I tell you like a good, as I said in that video, a good wrestling match tells a story.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to try to tell you the story of what I thought was a good wrestling match, it would probably leave no impact whatsoever. Because I mean, in the context of a wrestling match, the story could be something as simple as the babyface's favorite finishing move is a clothesline, but during the match, the heel hurts his arm, so he can't do that move. And that's the story of the match. And me just saying that to you means nothing. But when you see how that affects what happens in the match, and that
Yeah, but
affects,
that's not a story. That's a summary,
well,
dude. There's
but within, yeah, the story is what happens in the match. Yeah, I mean, what I just told you is the summary of the story, but it does. But unless you're watching,
the
and
story is not
also,
what happens in the match. I'm gonna fight you on this because what happens is the plot, and plot and story are not synonymous. Like
okay,
literally,
well,
literally, this was today's notes.
okay,
This
well,
was
this is
like if you go to my class website, it's up there for today.
this is another instance where the context is important because in wrestling terminology, and you probably, I'm sure you would hate this because of what you just said, and I agree with you, by the way, in terms of writing and movies and stuff, like, yeah, story and plot are not synonymous, but in the wrestling context, story and plot, it almost, first of all, plot isn't used very much in terms of a match.
Yeah.
Plot is sometimes used to describe what happens in like a longer sort of storyline.
Mhm.
But in terms of a match, it's almost always, I've almost always heard it spoken in terms of story. And yes, what they're saying when they say the story of a match is they're the closest analogy would be a plot. Um, but
But
that's
I mean,
just
well,
the way it's
and
talked
some of
about.
it also is, the elements of story include like setting. Well, the match, the setting is always like the ring.
Yeah, unless the city that it takes place in is relevant, which
Okay.
sometimes it is, but usually it isn't.
But
Yeah.
I will say that another one of the elements of story is character, and I think that I mean obviously
Oh,
that
very
does.
much.
I mean, because you talk about the baby face, and it's interesting because like I think of it as face and heel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Face and heel,
You
baby
almost
face.
you but you it's interesting to me because you almost always like just casually conversing, you'll say just baby face.
Yeah. Well,
Like it's just
that.
interesting.
Well, that's part of me being pretentious because in actual wrestlers and people actually in the wrestling business almost always say baby face. They very rarely say face. Face is sort of viewed as like a fan term.
Interesting.
Yeah, actual people who are in the business, again, and I, just, and I've never been in the business. I've just, do when I see wrestlers talking to each other or talking about wrestling and using those sort of, breaking kayfabe, they almost always say babyface and not face.
That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
And it's also interesting because you don't say it in a pretentious way. You just internalize that pretentiousness to such a degree.
Thank you.
You're
And
so
do you know what else? In Mexican wrestling, they're called, the baby faces are called technicos and heels are called rudos.
well, rudos certainly makes sense, but
Yeah.
technicos,
I guess it's derived from, like, because in actually uh the kayfabe terms for good guy and bad guy wrestlers back in the day, like in wrestling magazines that would cover wrestling but would never break kayfabe. Like they wrote about it as though it was a real sport. Like it
Right.
was the illusion was maintained completely. So they never said babyface heel because those were considered insider terms. So instead of saying a good guy and a good guy wrestler was referred to as a technical wrestler. So I think that might be where technico comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And bad guys were called rule breakers.
So those who followed the rules and those who broke them.
Yes.
So not
Yes.
like in terms of being technically skilled, but
No.
those who followed the rules.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was not. Yeah. Because there were. Yeah. Even if your wrestling style was very much like you were a brawler, you were a fighter, you were not a technical wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I thought it was going
Yeah.
from.
If you were a good guy, you were still referred to as a technical wrestler.
Yeah.
Or sometimes also a fan favorite. They also would call they would also refer to good guy wrestlers as fan favorites.
But as you pointed out,
Yeah.
sometimes the bad guy wrestlers become fan favorites.
Yes, that's right. That's right, and that has always happened.
Yeah.
That's always been an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, narrative. Some random geek, I would say that narrative and story are closer in meaning than plot and story.
Yeah.
But for example, memoir uses narrative is more about technique and story is more about meaning. So it has more to do again with context, I would say.
Well, and I would say, I mean, could you say that both narrative and plot are kind of underneath story?
Yes.
Because like narrative is the telling of a story.
Yes. Narrative is the mode.
Yeah, and plot is an element of story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so but they're both sort of under the story umbrella.
Loretta is asking about wrestling being staged and not real. Those are two different things. Look, they are really performing those moves. It's real. It's really happening. You know, it's not animated. You're not imagining it. It's real. Okay, it's really real.
The insider term is that it's a work. That's what wrestlers say. They say it's a work. And what that means is, because I mean, when you get into like when you say that like it's staged or it's, you know, it's scripted, those terms don't always apply to every wrestling match, because there are lots of wrestling matches, especially on the indies and especially back years ago before WWE's current style became like the dominant style. Lots of wrestlers would literally go into the ring and make up a match on the fly, and all they knew was what the finish was, and
it's improv.
And how much time they had. Yeah, exactly.
It's exactly what we do on the Ensign's log.
Exactly.
Jason knows how long the show needs to run, and he knows like certain beats.
Yeah.
But sometimes he only knows where we're going with it. We're going to end here.
Exactly.
And then we just go.
Exactly. Yeah. It is improv. Yeah. I mean, and that's, you know, so if you want to say that it's, I mean, it's fake in that sense. It's fake in the same sense that an Avengers movie is fake, because they're not really superheroes and they're not really fighting. You know, it's a performance.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, people don't usually. It's just like we were talking about fiction earlier. Like people don't usually think of fiction as fake,
as lying.
It's invented, it's created. It's not something that is literally happening in reality, but it's not fake. That term became attached to wrestling because for most of wrestling's history, they were actually trying to convince people that it was real. So they did kind of bring that on themselves. You know, like they would get wrestlers used to
trying to convince people that the competition.
Yes, that you were actually watching a legitimate fight. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for most of wrestling's history, that's where kayfabe comes in. Like kayfabe was protecting the business, was, you know, never referring to it within earshot of people who weren't in on the joke, that it wasn't a real sport.
So what's the etymology of kayfabe?
It's carny talk. It's actually carny talk for fake. Instead of saying fake, they would say kayfabe, which is like you deconstruct the word and kind of flip it.
You flip it. So it's like pig Latin.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar to pig Latin. And I mean, I can't speak carny, but a lot of old school wrestlers could actually talk carny. And that, again, that's the way that carnival workers would talk to each other when the marks, which is another wrestling term that comes from the carnival, were around, so that people who weren't in on the scam, they wouldn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because yeah, that's another thing is that wrestling fans,
it's this, you know,
yeah,
from the Sting.
yeah,
It's,
exactly. It's the
it's da 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 da. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. It's
it's
just,
like it's a subtler way of just basically going like, oh, dummy up, like people are listening, shut
yeah.
up, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then of course that makes me think of Chicago. Shut up, dummy.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, wrestling fans used to be called marks. I mean, that tells you all you need to know right there.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a sucker born every minute.
exactly. Like the you know, the old school expression of what the goal of a wrestling company was, how or what you need to do in order to be successful, was separate the mark from his money, which is literally the same premise of a con artist.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
Like,
like capitalism.
well, that too. I mean, yeah, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, I mean, but through you're deceiving people into thinking that they're watching one thing, but they're actually watching another thing, and getting them to pay to watch it on the basis of thinking that it's the thing that it's not.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. But for most of wrestling's history, that was the case. Even though, I mean, there were always, I mean, people, almost everybody has always either known or at least strongly suspected that it was a work. Like people who say, like, who, when I was growing up, everybody thought it was real. No, people have always kind of known that it was fake. But it used to be wrestlers and wrestling promoters used to expend a lot of energy to try and convince people that it was real. And they never publicly admitted that it wasn't.
Yeah. There was so one of the developers at White Wolf, and it's, oh gosh, it's been so long. Rob Hatch. I don't have a copy of this particular issue of the little newsletter that they put out, but he wrote an essay comparing vampires to wrestling. And it was so good. The parallels are amazing. He says, because you have the same types of people in both circles.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the diehard fans who are convinced that it's really real. And
right.
Like it doesn't matter like what you point, it doesn't matter what you do. And then you have the people who are like, who know that it's not real and who have fun with it. And then you have those who are just like, oh my God, you're such a loser. You like this and such.
Right.
You have the people who denigrate it and who can't appreciate it because they think that anybody who finds it interesting must be stupid for thinking that it's real. When
right.
you can appreciate a work as a work.
Absolutely.
And so, and then, all, and at the same time, the storytelling that goes into it. And so, I mean, this whole essay, and it was so good. I still love it. And I wish I had a copy of that sucker, or I could track it down online someplace.
And because wrestling storytelling, especially, I mean, generally speaking, and also particularly like within an actual wrestling match, is so simple, or at least in my opinion, it should be very simple. If you break it down into its simple elements, it can actually, I have found that it can actually be really useful when you apply those principles to other kinds of storytelling. Because there's another idea, there's another word associated with wrestling that means something differently in wrestling than it means in other places, which is psychology. And in wrestling, psychology just means that when you do something in a wrestling match, it has to make sense within the context of that match. Like why did you do that? You're going to put a particular move on your opponent. Why are you doing that? Imagine.
But it's, I mean, that's what, in literary terms, we would call internal consistency.
And in acting, you would call that motivation.
Yes.
Why is your character doing this? What meaning does this act have? What meaning do these words have to your character? Find a reason to do this.
Yeah. As an actor, yes.
Yes.
But then, not necessarily as a writer. As a writer, you're looking at the whole piece.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but when you're writing characters, I mean, you also want, you want your
you want them to
characters'
act
actions to make
consistently with
sense. Yeah,
themselves, but they also need to act in ways that are consistent with the world that you have created around them.
right. Yeah. So that idea of, you know, make it make sense. You know, don't put meaning behind the action. You know, so you're
So we
not
spent
just.
like the last half hour talking about wrestling.
I
How
know.
did we weren't talking about the other West more? I mean, we did that, and I'm so
There's
glad that we have spent the last half hour talking about, because man, the chapter ended on a downer, like a
yeah,
real downer.
and no wrestling talk at all. Even though DC and Baltimore are big wrestling towns historically, no wrestling talk at all.
Such a bummer.
Such a bummer. But anyway, yeah. But yeah,
I was just like, I happened to look at the time and like it's almost 8:30, and we've
don't
just been talking about wrestling.
don't get me started.
I think it was because I asked you about doing the survey, and I asked you. That's what it was.
Oh, that's right. And then that kind of got it in my ear, and
like
then yeah,
half an hour or
yeah.
more, because I think it was like 10 of when I asked you, and it's now almost.
Well, no, and because remember we were also talking about how stories play differently in different contexts.
Yes. We were talking about video games,
and I meant
and
video
some of
games
the
and
games that game boxes
yeah,
go by.
yeah.
We
So
have. I still. I'm debating. There's a cooperative game that I want to get called Hanabi, and it's only a few dollars. It's like under $10, but I'm reluctant because nothing is fun. Like,
yeah,
I can't expect something to be fun. Like, I can enjoy things, but I'm just like, so it would be hard to imagine this, given how much I'm enjoying this and how involved I am. But just in general, I've been really low energy this year, just because teaching has been so challenging. And so much of what I have has gone into that because I care deeply about it. There's a lot that I care deeply about it, and blah, it's such a. So like, when I'm like thinking about, I want to do something fun, I'm like, that seems like work.
yeah.
So I literally have, it's kind of like I took years and years and years to watch Shawshank Redemption, and then eventually when I did, I loved it. It was great, but I had to wait until I was in the right headspace. But it would be nice. I'm really looking forward to having everybody physically present and being able to do more stuff online, but like not only online, and really just be stuck there. Because even the in-person students, I mean, because everything has to be online, because I've got these students over here, I haven't done anything with the in-person students really that I have not done with the online students. Everything goes through the computer, and I'm talking to the in-person students. They don't really get to see me because my screen that has the notes is at the front of the room, and I'm at the back of the room because that's where the plug is for the computer. And so I'm talking to the backs of their heads.
Yeah.
So I'll be looking forward to having people in class again, people in the room. That'll be nice.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can have fun.
And do you think will that be in the fall?
I expect so, because of the advances in vaccination, especially since I teach high school. I'm thinking I will be interested to see what happens with requirements or expectations for vaccinations for students,
for
honestly.
kids. Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. I think our I mean, I live in a rural area, so our numbers, I mean, we still have almost daily, I'll see an email that says, everybody, there's going to be a call going out, says somebody else has had a positive test, and we've contacted the people who need to be quarantined because of this. I mean, but it's every day or two, every 3 days. But oh boy,
it's not over.
It's not. And but it's not as frequent as it had been, even here in a rural area. And so,
which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Progress, even incremental progress.
Not talking to anybody in particular.
Yes, I am, Jonathan. I'm talking to you.
Well, fuck it. Never mind.
Yeah, I love
I
you.
was going to help you be cute about it, but you weren't trying to be cute.
Oh no. I mean, I can't help.
You don't need to try.
But
you don't need to try.
I can be cute without trying to be. So why don't we go ahead, since it's been like 2.5 hours.
Let's wrap it up.
Thank God tomorrow is Saturday.
Yeah. So So don't forget the charity links in the description.
Go. I'm like over here pointing, and that does nothing.
my eyes, the goggles do nothing. But don't forget the charity links, charitylinks.page. Check those out and lend a helping hand to some of our friends.
They're also in the descriptions, aren't they?
They're in the description. Yeah, absolutely. And I just bumped my mic because I'm a professional. Also, don't forget Dana's YouTube channel. You just shot another video today, which will be up next week.
I did, and it'll go up Tuesday. But if you really enjoy watching me suffer, watch the video that I just posted, because I'm so. And some of it also may be that it's hitting at the end of the school year. But man, Pride and Prejudice, y'all, it is a slog. It is a slog.
You are not having a good time.
Oh.
And I feel bad for you in terms of your experience reading it, but it is absolutely a delight to watch those videos.
At least I think I've got 3 more videos to shoot, and then I'm done with it.
Yes. You can call it, you can put it on the resume and say, I read it. I did it. I don't ever have to do it again. So Dana's YouTube channel is also linked in the description. It's youtube.com/Dana Cole Dares. Check out her videos. I mean, I think all your videos are great, but the most recent Pride and Prejudice one is hysterical. And your video you did last week on failure is really good too.
Thank you.
So subscribe to Dana's channel, check out her videos, leave her comments.
Yes. Honest, I won't say. No, I really don't care if you subscribe. I really don't care. I'm not like monetizing or anything. So, but yeah, God, I love comments. I am such a, Steve, we haven't done a video in a while. I'm not going to get comments from those. God knows.
We need to do another.
It's going to have to wait till summer, dude.
Recorded video. I know. I'm completely on board with that. But
some random geek, you've mentioned Phoenix and Johanna. Are they in the charity links?
I think they are.
Okay, good. I think this is my first Austen work. In part because, I mean, essentially this is the one when I say I haven't read it, like other female, most English teachers the majority of English teachers are female. And so other female English teachers would be like, oh, like, you get the side eye for saying,
you haven't read Pride and Prejudice?
Everybody talks about Pride and Prejudice, and if I say, well, I haven't actually read it. So the next one is going to be, I didn't actually like it.
And then you will truly be a pariah among your own people.
Well, what I'll have to do is say that I realize that Austen was using it as a social commentary on her time, but we can't ignore her own biases from, being influenced by that same society.
There you go.
Exactly. And then you say, you just have to say, I didn't like it in an academic way, and then it's okay.
Yeah. You can't just say, I thought it sucked. I hated all the characters. I was so happy when it was over.
I still see no chemistry between, there's no actual chemistry between Elizabeth and Darcy. It's not there, guys. Yeah. She forgives him because he didn't actually, because he had reasons not to give, because Mr. Wickham originally turned down the job.
Right.
Instead of it being refused to him the first time he asked for it, which is how, because Mr. Wickham actually lied, or presented the facts in a deceitful manner.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Mr. Darcy is not deceitful in that particular instance, never mind the fact that he is deceitful in other ways, that means like she really likes him. I'm like, I get, maybe that's just it. Maybe her stand. I don't hate everyone. I really don't.
You don't hate everyone.
I like the people that I'm not supposed to like, and I don't like the people that I'm supposed to like. That's been my problem with it. And of course, the people that I'm supposed to like are the ones that you spend the most time with. So that's not pleasant.
Which is a problem.
Yeah. No, Ensign Hal, Steve would be so done if we started talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, then the stream is done already, but the stream is almost done now. But if it would really be done if you were like, hey, I'm going to spend the next hour talking about D&D. Okay, well, you let me know how that goes.
Click.
Is that a stream you're going to have on your YouTube channel? But anyway, so yeah,
I could live stream now. I don't know how, but theoretically I could.
Well, you'll just, I mean, I can.
No.
I can show you how if you want.
No.
Okay, well then, never mind.
I have mentioned it. I think they've got other things to do with their time. For the most
do
part.
They really want to watch their English teacher do a live stream on Friday night?
Honestly, especially some of them have actually chosen Pride and Prejudice as their independent reading book, and I've told them that I'm reading it. But I think I say in my first video, look, y'all, if you're watching these videos instead of reading the book, just read the book.
It's not a replacement for the book. Yeah.
So the same thing with the other Wes Moore. I mean, it's going to take us. We do this every other week. He's every other week so it's like 16 weeks. So that's, God, am I mathing right? It's like 4 months. 4 months. Yeah. They won't have that much patience. Just read the darn book.
Just read the book.
Like, seriously, the other Wes Moore is not a tough read. Y'all can do it in a weekend.
Yeah, just take a weekend and read the damn book.
I probably need to like pare down my study guide, because I have like 6 to 8 questions plus like a paragraph response for each chapter, which to me doesn't seem like a lot, but I keep getting told that I assign too much work. And I believe in the value of the work of like literally every question that's on there. I'm like, yes, but that's important.
Right. You didn't just throw in random questions.
Draw your attention to this. Oh, so like,
it's almost as if you know what you're doing and you've put thought into it.
Really?
If I didn't know any better.
Here I thought I just sneezed on the keyboard and, what came out was the worksheet.
He just set a monkey in front of a typewriter and said, make my lesson plan. Anyway.
Finding a monkey would be way too much work, Steve.
Yeah, where am I going to get a monkey? How am I going to keep the monkey in front of the typewriter? Think about it. Just use your head.
Typewriter, Steve.
Where am I going to get a typewriter? A mechanical typewriter? Are you kidding me?
Probably a Goodwill, to be honest.
That's true. You probably find one for not that much.
Thrift stores have typewriters.
Yeah, you could probably find one for not that much. Anyway, so we will be back together on Wednesday to watch the next episode of Firefly. We're getting down to the end. We only have, I think, 2 episodes and then the movie left, and then we're done with Firefly.
Oh yeah, I need to look at the movie and figure out where the
break will be, because we'll be doing the movie in two pieces, like we did for the pilots.
So that'll get me into the summer. Okay, yeah. So I don't have to worry about it before school's out.
Thank God. And the episode, the Firefly episode we're watching on Wednesday is Heart of Gold. Which is a great Neil Young song. I'm just saying.
I don't care.
Wow.
What? I'm just being honest. Do you object to that?
No, I do not.
Okay, Loretta asks, what about the quiz results? Which of us are sociopaths? Well, I definitely am.
No. with a gleam in your eye and a smile on your lips. I definitely am.
No, it's not about that. These are all things that to some degree or other relate to the story, as well as to some of our internalized attitudes, just in a general sense, that provide some talking points about, where these ideas come from, how they're reinforced. So in order to in order to reinforce, the some of the themes of the story, we'll be talking about 2 of the prompts each time we do another chapter, and that'll take us through. I think the last one will have just 1, or on one of them when I pick it out, we'll have just 1.
There you
So,
go. So you won't know which one of you are sociopaths until the very end.
so yeah, we'll be, we'll be collecting data on all of you.
On your sociopathy.
JHSMDH is shaking my damn head.
Shake my damn head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably not particularly kind. I don't know. I sort of see that as 2 ways. Probably not very appropriate or compassionate of me to make a joke about sociopathy as a but on the other hand, saying normalizing it in that sense, saying why not? I am in that sense that it shouldn't be a big deal. Say, oh, by the way, yes. So you're welcome. So that popped in my head. Maybe that wasn't cool, but
yeah,
it shouldn't be something, and it is, which sucks.
Yeah.
But I never got any flack for saying that I had cancer. Somebody else, depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or
I keep thinking that we go up and down, and I keep thinking, oh, here we are. We're at a peak. We're going to end the live stream on a positive note, and then it's right back down to stigmatization of mentally ill people.
Yeah, mental illness is illness, and
Yeah.
But in fairness, though, we think that my dad's mom may have died of breast cancer, but nobody talked about it. And I mean, and now, like, it's you got Pinktober,
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a whole thing.
It's not a big deal to talk about. And I hope we can get to the place where we can do the same thing with any illness.
That would be nice.
Whether that's mental illness or, AIDS or, sexually transmitted infections, just sure.
Absolutely.
Just talk about
having a particular medical condition is not evidence of a moral failing.
Yeah. It's just something that happens with your body.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note.
Yeah. Is that an okay note to end on, Steve?
That's a good note to end on. Yes.
All right.
That's a good note to end on. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you. We'll see you Wednesday for the next Trek Reluctantly. And I also, that day I have a new Trek Actually video going up that I'm writing that I'll shoot tomorrow. And I'll be back a week from tonight for the next Ask Away. Don't forget the charity links. Don't forget Dana's YouTube channel. I think we've covered it all. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be back to talk about Chapter 2 of The Other Westmore. So thanks for sticking around with us. Thanks for reading along with us. Those of you who are, and those of you who aren't, thanks for watching anyway. And we hope it was enjoyable for you.
And bring your lists back next time we do this.
Yes, absolutely. Bring your answers to the survey back so we can talk about them. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.